and thank you so much for joining us for this Thursday's edition of Alaska Weather, 18th day of November 2021. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, hosting today's show again. And checking out the first graphic here, again, an almost total lunar eclipse Thursday night, tonight, of the moon. And you can see got about halfway, 50% partial eclipse at around 10:18 p.m. this evening, with the greatest eclipse, not quite all, but it looks pretty darn close there, at a little after midnight, 12:03 a.m., and then back to half eclipse at 1:47 a.m. Friday morning. And of course, if it's clear out, you should be able to take a look at it. And from there, moving on to the hazardous weather graphic. Blizzard warning out for the eastern Arctic coast there, Kaktovik, Barter Island, and that's out through noon Friday. Winds gusting 55 miles an hour, whiteout conditions, and nearly impossible travel in some areas up there due to these heavy drifting and blowing of the snow. Whiteout conditions again, and that's expected to continue through noon Friday, at which time winds should be coming down tomorrow afternoon definitely, and into the first day of the weekend as well. Otherwise, winter weather advisory back toward Prudhoe Bay and to the west there, winds lighter, more around the 50 mile an hour range, and visibility is not quite as bad. So just an advisory there, and winter weather advisories out for the eastern North Slope and eastern and southeast Brooks Range. Again, that's out until, let's see, 6 p.m. Friday, and that's could see 1 to 2 inch additional snowfall. And with winds gusting to 40 miles an hour, that'll create visibilities down to a quarter mile or less at times in blowing snow. And from there, we'll take a look at winter weather, actually a winter storm warning for heavy snow out for Yakutat and Juneau, as well as Pelican and Gustavus, I believe is how it's pronounced. I never really hear that city pronounced too many times, so I'm a little shaky on that one, as well as others on the pronunciation. Anyway, Yakutat looking for 6 to 9 inches of snow before the warning ends, and 5 to 10 inches expected. Again, total snow accumulation for Juneau. Pelican, same thing, 5 to 10 inches, 4 to 8 inches Gustavus, and again, that's through 4 p.m. today, so just a few more hours. And except Juneau, Pelican, Gustavus through midnight tonight. And otherwise, winter weather advisory out for Sitka. Look for 2 to 6 inches of snow there, right on the coastline there at Sitka, and that's through 9 p.m. this evening. And from there, we'll take a look at the snowfall total snow reports through Thursday morning. Hyder, down to the south there, 11 inches of snow fell, 6 inches at Yakutat. Juneau through Thursday morning picked up 3 to 6 inches. This morning, Gustavus 3.5 inches, Hoona about 1 to 2 inches, and only an inch in Haines. So more snow expected through this evening, and some areas even longer than that. For the satellite imagery, you can see low pressure spinning there and moving eastward just south of the eastern North Gulf Coast. Cold air pouring out and clearing skies, drier conditions coming in from the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, but lower clouds developing over southern Cook Inlet with the cold air coming out over the open water, picking up some moisture, and winds have really dropped off, going almost calm this afternoon. Kodiak, Akiak, little light snow occurring at both locations there, along with reported volcanic ash at Kodiak State Airport. But that cold air moving westward across the Gulf, picking up moisture, bringing the convective snow showers that develop over the eastern Gulf and eastern North Gulf Coast, kind of interact with the terrain and develop into kind of just a steady precipitation pattern as they move inland, and snowfall levels coming down. Still upper 30s to near 40 over the southern southeast coast at mid-afternoon, but that'll be dropping, and temperatures near freezing or so to the north, but even the southern areas will see snowfall levels down to sea level. Overnight tonight, back to the west, northern Bering Sea kind of split there, with the weak front still has yet to bring precipitation into the Pribilof Islands, and maybe Unmac Island picked some up. Some of that moisture shearing off. Sandpoint at about quarter of an inch of snow possibly, and some light rain showers around Adak. Otherwise, not a lot of precipitation at any of the reporting stations out there with that, but you can see the easterly flow and also the sea ice there along the southwest coast, and then the open water, and then the cold air picks up enough moisture, the edge of the clouds form, and a little bit of light snow. Let's see, flurries, St. Lawrence Island with the clouds there, and also up over the eastern interior, some light snow going on there, and as well as the northern Kuskokwim Valley. Let's see, up to an inch in the greater Fairbanks area, and to the northeast there, up toward Upper Chena, maybe 1 to 3 inches fell in the last 12 hours. And Nikolai picked up about a ½ inch, as well as Sparavon, some light snow going on there into the afternoon. And but that's about it as far as snowfall goes. And then the clouds with the areas of snow and the blowing snow and the gusty winds, the big thing up along the Arctic coast, there temperatures below zero, putting wind chills down around 40 to 50 below up there along the eastern Arctic coast. And another surge of moisture coming southward from the Arctic there, big upper level high north of the eastern Russian coast there. That's circulating moisture from north to south there, keeps bringing surges into the Arctic coast, but nothing too heavy as far as snow goes, but keeping the winds pretty gusty. And that front weakening there over the, actually another system south of the Sandpoint area, they got about maybe a little bit of snow today, kind of shearing off from the main frontal boundary there, and that's mostly sliding south of Kodiak, with some of that catching Sitkinak. Looks like some light snow going on there, and it'll be moving eastward. And on the chart today, there's the snow over the northern Panhandle, snow blowing snow eastern Arctic coast, frontal boundary, kind of an Arctic boundary there over the southern Bering Sea. Tonight, that doesn't move a whole lot. Maybe some moisture finally gets into the Pribilofs. Maybe it won't. But Alaska Peninsula, chance of snow, rain or snow, eastern Aleutians, rain or snow showers for the entire Aleutian chain. Wind's not too bad out that way. And snow pushes south. That Arctic front pushes south. Look for snow all the way to sea level, even over the southern Panhandle. And cold and dry, central and southern interior Alaska. Snow flurries diminish, but linger over toward the upper Tanana Valley, or the 40-mile country, Eagle southward to maybe Northway. And for tomorrow, improving conditions, especially in the afternoon. Eastern Arctic coast, winds will come down, but won't end completely, but winds increase over the northern Panhandle. Colder, drier air pushing in behind that system. Still snow down south, and snow showers Kodiak Island, maybe the southern Kenai Peninsula, Port Moller, Seldovia, into Kamishak Bay, but generally clear and cold. Central southern Alaska, again, temperatures below zero. Most areas single numbers south and east of the Alaska Range, but warmer along the North Gulf Coast. And then for Saturday, big storm south of Kodiak Island, and snow blowing, snow developing, storm force, gale and storm force winds, especially ahead of that front, will be pushing in toward the southern Panhandle. But winds coming up all across the southeast coast, increasing snow and blowing snow. Same thing, some of that might even get up into the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound area. Lows tonight, below zero again, anywhere from 20 to 40 below over interior Alaska, 5 to 10 below out to the southwest coast, and below zero south central Alaska, Kenai Peninsula, anywhere from 10 to 20 below in some areas. Homer, 1 above, 30s, southern Panhandle, mid-teens up toward Haines and Skagway, 15 for Kodiak Island, mid to upper 30s for the Aleutians. Highs Friday afternoon, staying below zero, much of interior Alaska, except south of the Alaska Range and to the east. Single numbers there, but near 20 for Homer, near freezing for Kodiak, near 20 northern Panhandle to the near 40 range for the southern southeast coast, freezing for Kodiak, mid 40s for Unalaska. And then the lows Saturday morning, pretty cold in the interior again, anywhere from 20 to 40 below central eastern interior areas to a little above zero along the Arctic coast, and near zero from the north slope. Single numbers, northern Panhandle to upper 20s to near 30 down to the south, mid 20s Kodiak Island, right around zero for Bristol Bay, staying above freezing for the Aleutians, upper 20s for the Pribilofs, followed by highs staying below zero interior Alaska, 5 to 15, south central Alaska, mid 20s toward Homer. Quite a range across the Panhandle, and single numbers for the Arctic coast, upper 30s to lower 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, 34 for Kodiak, lower 40s in the Aleutians.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First line weather graphic for Friday morning. IFR, eastern Arctic coast, central eastern north slope, with marginal VFR to the west, and then south of the Brooks Range, good VFR all the way down to Kachemak, Kamishak Bays, Prince William Sound, and most of the Panhandle. Marginal VFR Kodiak Island, IFR Alaska Peninsula westward to around Adak, and then northwestward, just clipping St. George Island. Marginal VFR southwest bearing western Aleutians, and then marginal VFR zone sliding up across St. Lawrence Island. For the afternoon, we've got marginal VFR North Slope Arctic Coast, northwest coast, bearing straight north side of the Seward Peninsula, Shishmaref down to Gamble. And breaking out to VFR, Shimei-Attu and Kiska and Amchitka, but IFR wrapping in around that low center, coming back in from the northwest into Adak, and then behind the front starting to improve for Nikolsky, but on Alaska it looks IFR into the Alaska Peninsula. Marginal VFR across most of Bristol Bay, the Aleutian Range, Kodiak Island, and IFR, Southern Panhandle, VFR elsewhere. And for Saturday morning, marginal VFR, North Slope, Arctic Coast, Northern Seward Peninsula, Bering Strait, and IFR from the Central Aleutians across the Pribilofs down across on Alaska and part of Unmak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, Southern Bristol Bay, and clipping AKwx, Sitkinak, Southern Kodiak Island, marginal VFR up to Fognak Island. Good VFR from the Brooks Range southward into the Gulf of Alaska, and all of the panhandles, the marginal VFR holding off the coast. And for Saturday afternoon, that changes. That a pretty good push of marginal VFR and across all the panhandle northward to the North Gulf Coast with a pretty good system, but the IFR farther to the south just sliding in across Prince of Wales Island, Metlakatla, Ketchikan, and over toward Hyder, and of course Dixon Entrance. That extends westward across Kodiak Island, Fognak Island, all IFR, and the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, western Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, VFR from Adak westward to the Komodorskis, marginal VFR right along St. Paul Island, St. George, then a break, and then more marginal conditions for the northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, and a zone of IFR for the central North Slope. From there, looking at passes, Anatuvik, possible marginal VFR, northern entrance, otherwise VFR. Same thing for Adigan, possible marginal conditions on the north entrance, otherwise looking really good. Lake Clark and Merrill, good VFR. VFR for Rainy, windy VFR. Isabel, VFR. And Mintasta, VFR. Tanita, VFR as well. And staying open, Sealing's visibility is mostly unlimited for Portage. And Chilkoot and White, VFR. A little turbulent, but VFR. And for the freezing levels at the surface there, down to the Alaska Peninsula, south of the Pribilofs, at least through tomorrow morning, push of warmer air trying to make it to the, well, it does make it to the eastern Aleutians, 2,000 feet, but that's south of the Panhandle there. So moving on to icing. Possibility of some icing potential up there over the North Slope and Arctic coast, otherwise none in interior Alaska, northern Bering Sea icing free, southern Bering, Pribilofs down across the Aleutians, chance of some isolated moderate rime or mixed icing there, patch in the Gulf of Alaska and central and southern southeast coastal areas. Moving on to the jet stream, we've got westerly 65 knots, increased to about 90 to 95 knots, and then cut in across the southern panhandle. Westerlies there, cold air to the north, warmer air to the south, and with the jet stream kind of sagging southward, cold air will be moving into the northern southeast coast. Cold air covers all of interior Alaska and the northern Bering Sea. And for the 9,000 foot wind flow, a little bit more action there in the Bering Sea. Got that low near the central Aleutians, 50 knot easterlies on the north quadrant of that. Otherwise, westerlies 35, pick up to about 60 knots as it cuts across the southern panhandle. And high pressure over the Bering Strait keeps a weak northerly flow pattern going over much of interior Alaska, easterly over the Bering Sea. 3,000 feet easterlies, 40 knots out of the northeast there, near the lower Yukon River Valley areas, northern Kuskokwim Valley, and then pick up to 55 knots and even 60 knots on the north side of that low, but pretty light, 50 knotters cutting across Dixon Entrance. Turbulence, moderate chop, Yukon River, lower Yukon River into the central interior, western Alaska Range, and over the Aleutians as well as the southern southeast coast.
Hey Sky Nerds, Trace here. Planets are distinct in the night sky because we can actually visit them, like the 3 planets we've probed. Hit the skies just after sunset and look for Venus in the southwest. Probes of Venus's surface show a hexscape of toxic sulfur, oppressive heat, and volcanic activity. The solar orbiter flew by in August 2021 and showed why it's earned the nickname the evening and morning star. It is so bright. Up and to the left of Venus is the majestic ringed Saturn. Cassini plunged into Saturn in 2017 after studying its moons, rings, and atmosphere. You can see its hexagonal aurora on its pole. The third visible planet this week is jolly old Jupiter. Juno recently studied the planet, learning a lot before diving into the atmosphere to get crushed. Look how unctuous Jupiter's clouds can be. Wow. Every dot tells a story, and you can learn them if you keep looking up.
Tsunamis are a big threat not only to Alaska but around the Pacific because we have a lot of really big fault lines, and when they move in big earthquakes, they often move the water around them, and that's what causes tsunamis. I am Summer Ohlendorf, and I'm the science officer at NOAA's National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska. Alaska's main tsunami threat is from the subduction zone that lays along the southern end of the state. When an earthquake happens underneath the ocean at one of these subduction zones, the edge of one of the tectonic plates ends up kind of flipping up as stress is released at that plate boundary. And when it flips up, it pushes up the water that sits on top of it, and it moves a whole lot of water all at once. And that water all then becomes part of the tsunami wave. Just like when you throw a rock into a pond, you get a series of ripples that head outward from where the rock landed. Tsunami waves travel outward from the disturbance caused by the earthquake. And that means you can get multiple waves, and they're really long waves that can last for hours. Tsunami waves can be hundreds of miles long from one crest to the next crest. And that means that those crests, or the tops of the two waves, can come in 20 minutes apart to an hour apart. In the deep ocean, tsunami waves are actually usually pretty small. They can be anywhere from a few centimeters to maybe a meter, depending on how far offshore you are. As tsunami waves approach the coast, they kind of pile up on each other, and the energy gets compressed, so they grow in size and they slow down a lot as the wave is squeezed into a smaller space. If you're standing on the beach and a tsunami may be coming, you may hear strange noises like an approaching freight train. You may also see water being sucked away from the shore much further than it would for a low tide, and much faster. And sometimes you can hear things like rattling of sand and rocks. So just being alert for any strange ocean behavior and strange noises is always a good idea when you're near the coast. Most likely you're not going to see something like a huge 100-foot breaking wave as a tsunami approaches. It's probably going to look something more like a step of water that's maybe a few feet high, or just a turbulent mass of water. And it may not be very big, but it's going to be moving pretty fast, and it's going to be probably carrying a lot of debris with it. Even what we think of as small tsunamis can be really dangerous because they're associated with a lot of energy and a lot of fast-moving water. The National Tsunami Warning Center is part of NOAA and the National Weather Service. At the Tsunami Warning Center, we're monitoring streams from seismic data and sea level data 24/7 every day of the year. So the seismic data tells us how the Earth is moving, it tells us when there are earthquakes, and using that data we can figure out where the earthquakes are, how big they are, and how deep they are, which tells us something about the tsunami hazard from those quakes. So as far as monitoring water levels, there's something called the DART system. That stands for Deep Ocean Assessment and Reporting of Tsunamis. And what those are little stations where there's a pressure sensor on the ocean floor and a buoy anchored nearby. The way it knows the difference between a normal ocean swell and a tsunami is mostly because of the wavelength. And when we look at the signal from a DART system, we can see those big long waves and distinguish them from other smaller transient waves. Our system of coastal tide gauges is also distributed worldwide and all across the ocean basins. And what these end up telling us is what the tsunami wave is doing at the coastline. We send out an information statement when there's an earthquake near one of our coastlines that doesn't pose a tsunami hazard. We also have the tsunami watch that may be issued for a faraway earthquake that has the potential to impact one of our coastlines. A tsunami warning is our most serious level, and that is the case where we would want people to evacuate from the coastline. If you hear a tsunami warning, you'll want to evacuate from that hazard zone to travel to a safe shelter, or just anywhere that's inland or higher ground outside of the hazard zone. Ahead of time, you'll want to think about where to go, what to take, and how you'll communicate with your friends and family members once you get there. It's important to remember that during a tsunami evacuation, a lot of people are going to be crowded onto the same routes trying to evacuate. During a tsunami warning, you may hear about it over the TV and radio, an alert on your cell phone. You can also see tsunami information directly on our website, www.tsunami.gov. And we're also on Facebook and Twitter, where we issue our alerts during the event.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the coastal water forecast, pretty light for the central coast of the Panhandle tomorrow. North to northwest, 15 knots, seas around 8 feet. But gale warnings down on the south coast for southwest winds sustained at 35 knots. Small craft advisories for the north coast. Northeast winds at 25 knots. Gale warnings also for Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, northern inner channels. North sustained 35 knots with storm force gusts out of the north, and north 25 knots, small craft advisories for Stevens Passage, and a northwest wind at 20 knots for Clarence Strait with seas at 8 feet. And moving on to the outlook for Saturday, first day of the weekend, north winds 30 knots, Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, Stevens Passage northeast at 25 knots, and for Clarence Strait, southeast winds 25 knots. Small craft advisories also along the central and south coast of the Panhandle. For the south coast, south-southeast at 30 knots. And the north coast, gale warnings for east winds at 35 knots with seas 17 feet. And for Cook Inlet, northern Cook Inlet, northeast breeze at 15 knots tomorrow, seas at 3 feet. Small craft advisory south of the Forelands, 25 knot northeast winds in the forecast. And Kamishak Bay, north winds at 30 knots, north 25 for the Barren Islands. Prince William Sound, north winds 20 knots, seas 3 feet. Small craft advisories for the eastern North Gulf Coast for northeast winds at 25 knots with gusts of 45 knots out of the Copper River Delta and seas at about 6 feet. Moving on to Saturday, Prince William Sound, not too bad. Northeast winds 15, seas 3 feet. North 15 for Cook Inlet, but south of the Forelands, still small craft advisories. Northeast winds 25 knots, 30 knots out of the northeast for Kamishak Bay. Gale warnings now for the Barren Islands, northeast 35 knots, seas building to 20 feet. And gale warnings also for the western North Gulf Coast for northeast winds at 35 knots and seas under 20 feet. Northeast 30 knots for the eastern North Gulf Coast around Middleton Island, seas at about 16 feet. And for Kodiak Island, Friday, northeast 20-25 knots, Bristol Bay, northeast at 30 knots, and the Alaska Peninsula, east winds at 30 knots with seas just under 10 feet. First day of the weekend for Kodiak Island, gale warnings come back. Northeast winds 35 to 40 knots, strongest on the east side of the island, seas building to 22 feet. And Sitkinak to Castle Cape, gale warnings, northeast winds 35 knots, the Alaska Peninsula, northeast at 30 knots with 8 to 16 foot seas. And for Bristol Bay, northeast winds 30 knots with seas at 6 feet. excuse me, on Alaska Island, east winds 25 to 30 knots with 8 to 9 foot seas. Unmac Island, south to southeast winds 25 knots. AKwx, south to southwest winds 25 to 30 knots. Gale warnings for northwest winds at 35 knots on Chitka Island. Kiska to Shemya, north winds 25 knots. Saturday, northeast 25 for Shemya to Kiska. North 30 knots on Chitka Island. AKwx, north 25 knots. Unmac Island, northeast 15 to 20 knots. On Alaska Island, northeast 20 to 25 knots. Seas up to 11 feet. Southwest coast, Friday, northeast winds 30 knots. Seas 7 feet. Pretty uniform there. Those northeast winds turn easterly across the northern Bering Sea. St. Matthew Island, east at 30 knots. Pribilof, St. Paul, St. George Islands, east at 30 knots. Seas at about 11 feet. St. Lawrence Island, lighter winds into Norton Sound, both northeast 20 knots. And for the day Saturday, St. Lawrence Island, no change, northeast at 20 knots. Southwest coast, no change either. Northeast winds at 30 knots with 7 to 8 foot seas. Northeast 30 knot winds in the forecast for St. Matthew, St. Paul, and St. George Islands with seas around 12 feet. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, strongest winds will be in a downward trend, but the strongest winds will be over toward Kaktovik, Barter Island, the demarcation point, coming down under gale force tomorrow afternoon. Northwest at 30 knots, otherwise central and east side, northwest at 15, and then up to 20 knots from the northwest on the western Arctic coast. Wales to Cape Beaufort, call it west-northwest, 15 to 20 knots. And for Saturday, north to northeast winds 15 to 20 knots. Wales to Cape Beaufort, north winds 15 knots for the western coast, and west winds 15 knots for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And for tonight, blizzard warning continues there for the Barter Island, Kaktovik area, eastern Arctic coast for whiteout conditions, just whiteout conditions. Otherwise, clear and cold over interior Alaska down to the Gulf of Alaska. And chance of snow showers Kodiak Island, and then jump ahead to Saturday, big storm just south of Kodiak into the Panhandle.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.